And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. It is Friday, January 24th. I am Josh Engleman. I'm joined by DK. We're brought to you by the Bink promo, where all we do is create milli winners on the NFL side. And if we could just get a milli on the NBA side, we'll probably create one there too. 3 games today. Very weird, lackluster Friday slate. For those of you that like Saturdays, you got 14 games tomorrow. Have some fun. But today, we kind of got to talk about every player that's going to play any sort of real minutes because it's all on the table. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow us both on Twitter. DK, what's up? What do you think of this 3-gamer?
Pretty gross 3-gamer, but we can go a little bit more in depth into each team. Again, we'll be talking about like the 8th and 9th guy of like every team. So a little bit different again for Friday. We're usually used to big slates, but yeah, I mean, we still have good sized contests too, and I still think there's going to be edge. There's still a lot of questionable like tags too for a 3-game slate. So we definitely do have a lot to talk about, even though it's only 3 games.
Ooh, we just got news 14 minutes ago. Seth Curry now questionable, which could have some impact depending on how the other Q tags go. Right. Probably won't matter too much if LaMelo ends up in and Miles Bridges ends up in, but if they both end up out, we were already going to be getting a bunch of Vasily Micic, but we're going to get a bunch more in that regards. All righty, folks, make sure you're hitting that like button because that's where we want to start. Let's just dive in because we have an absolute boatload to talk about for each one of these teams, and we are going to start it off. Portland Trailblazers, 5.5-point dogs in Charlotte, 222 total. Now, for Portland, we don't have... I thought we were going to end up with pretty crazy injury news for these guys. That doesn't appear to be the case. DeAndre Ayton is just out. So we got that early. Kamara's probable. Chris Murray's questionable. Simons is probable. Time Lord out. And then that's kind of everything that mattered because Donovan Clingan is back, which I didn't know was going to happen when I did my show this morning. So the assumption is Donovan Clingan starting at center, some form of Jabari Walker and Dwop Reith as the backups, likely Walker. Let's just start with Clingan. 4K, center only, currently projected for 40% ownership on the DraftKings side. How much are you expecting out of him for playing time? How do you feel about that ownership? What do you want to do with Donovan Clingan?
Yeah, so I want to keep an eye on the news for Clingan. Obviously, we're all expecting him to start. He's been out for about a week and a half. Yeah, I don't think he would be limited, but I think there's like a chance like they could ease him back in. What I'm expecting in a competitive game is probably somewhere in the like 20 to 23 minute range. Like I don't think we're going to see more than like mid to high 20s. I think it's possible that could be like the very high end, but I think like low 20s minutes for Clingan is kind of what I'm expecting. And on the season, he is a 1.09 fantasy point per minute player. So in general, I think he does stand out as a pretty good value play. The ownership is there. So yeah, overall, I think he's a solid value right now. Are you expecting similar run, like low 20s for Clingan?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I went 24 in my projections. I went through everything, tried to figure it out. I started at 22, which felt like about right for him coming back off of the injury. I wanted to at least acknowledge the fact that, you know, in theory, he could play like an extra minute or two. He figures 6 minutes a quarter, closes in a competitive game, could get to 24. But when I had him in for 22 and then I started digging into rates, I couldn't get anywhere near his points prop or his rebound prop at 22 minutes. I had to get him up to 24. And even then that left me a little bit light on the point side. Didn't seem to matter when I got my exposures because he's in 80% of my lineups, but I went a little bit more aggressive. I'm nervous about that, but at least based on the betting lines, I think that 22 to 24 range is what we should be expecting for him. Are you anticipating Jabari Walker as the backup?
Yeah, so I am expecting Jabari Walker to play the backup 5. Last game, we had Robert Williams start at the 5, and then Jabari Walker played a majority of the backup center minutes. You did see a few minutes there for where they want small ball with kind of Denny at the 5. But I'm expecting Jabari to play a majority of the backup center minutes. And if he does, I actually think he's a pretty interesting play right now. He's 3.3K, getting sub 5% ownership. Now there's some risk for sure. Again, they could try to go small ball a bit behind Klingon. It's possible you could see a little bit of Duop Reef. We haven't seen that the last 2 games, but 3 games ago when a few centers were out for Portland, you did see a little bit of Duop Reef. But yeah, like if Jabari Walker plays 20 minutes, let's just say, at 3.3K, I actually think he's a pretty interesting tournament option.
I'd like to get a little bit more. I didn't get much. I got him as a 0.85 guy. In theory, he could grab any extra minutes if anything happens to Klingon. I mean, this is an ankle injury for a dude that's an absolute monster. I don't think it would take much to tweak that again. You know, when it comes to sprained ankles, they're always very easy to re-sprain. At least in my experience, they had been. So I think the path for him to grab a couple extra minutes is certainly there. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that they want to split all 48 minutes between those 2 guys. That's not how I have it right out of the gate. I think that they could go smaller with like Jeremy Grant potentially, or Denny Avdia, whoever you want to call the nominal 5 in that scenario. But I do like the shout. I mean, he is pulling 4% ownership. He's 3,300. I don't think it would be crazy if he got a couple extra minutes here. And he's not the worst per minute guy in the world, that it's not a problem if you get there. It doesn't take much, especially at that salary. I have the target score for a $3,300 player at 21 fantasy points. That is very obtainable on a 3-game slate. So I like the shout out there for Walker. What do you want to do with the rest of these guys? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna add one more thing with Walker too, because it's a nice leverage spot there in tournaments, especially assuming Klingon starts. Like, he's gonna get a lot of ownership. If he plays a bit less than we're expecting, or, I mean, Klingon's very foul prone, like foul trouble is definitely in the range of outcomes. Like there is downside. And if like, let's just say half the field clicks Klingon and he plays less or gets in some foul trouble, and you click a sub 5% on Jabari Walker and he gets extended, like that could win you a tournament, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The path is really clean. The only thing that concerns me, and I don't even know if it should, is just like, they could just give additional run to Reith for a rotation, and he doesn't get anything
for sure
extra. They seem to never want to play Reith, but they did get him in like that 17-minute game like a week or 2 ago. So that would be my only concern, but I don't even know if I should have that as a concern. They seem to hate Reith. They really do. I don't know why he's on the team. Like, if he's not going to be the backup to the 4th string dude, like, I don't know what to do here. What do you want to do with the rest of these guys, though? 20% ownership coming into Simons, 20 into Avdia. Call it 10 for Kamara and Grant. Not much coming into Sharp or Scoot, assuming those guys are coming back off the bench still. I don't have a ton of interest in them either. What are you doing with the rest of these guys?
Yeah, so I think that Denny and Simons at around 20% are both solid plays, kind of in the mid-range. So Denny, again, if Portland decides to go small ball a bit, like, he would benefit a bit there. Anthony Simons, assuming they go that same starting lineup of Simons, Denny, Kamara, Grant, Klingon, we'll do a bit more ball handling with Sharp and Scoot coming off the bench. So I think he looks like a solid point per dollar option. On the season, Anthony Simons is a 0.97 fantasy point per minute player. I think you're probably expecting a competitive game, mid-30s minutes or so. So I think those 2 are decent options in the mid-range, that being Denny, that being Simons. Jeremy Grant and Kamara coming in a little bit less owned. They're both in the low 5K range. I think they're reasonable filler plays, but no one, neither I'm going to go out of my way to play. So I don't really have any super strong takes on the other centers. The guys off the bench, like Scoot is 6.8K. He only played 14 minutes last game, but he got in massive foul trouble. He's definitely going to play more. I just don't, with him coming off the bench, I think it's a bit tough to go to him at that price point. I think Sharp off the bench would be, I guess, easier to get to, just because he's about $1,000 cheaper, but still, with him moving to the bench, the minute ceiling goes down a bit. Played 33 minutes off the bench in his first game, 28 in that game against Miami. Last game was a blowout, played 24 minutes. And then let's see, is there anyone else I wanted to mention for Portland? I mean, Delano Banton is 3.5K. He's a good point per minute player. I just don't know how many minutes you can expect. I think I would feel better about Banton is Chris Murray still questionable?
He is.
Okay. Yeah, so I would feel better about Banton if Chris Murray gets rolled out.
Yeah, I would certainly be willing to look at Banton if Murray is out. I don't think that you could look at him otherwise. I have people that watch the show regularly won't be surprised. I've got a lot of Anthony Simons today. It seems to be part of whatever I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm 2xing the field on Simons right now, 6,400, point guard, shooting guard eligible. One, I like the matchup. I think that helps. Two, I think it's really beneficial to not have Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson on the floor alongside of him. When that's going to be Kamara, Denny, Grant, and Donovan Clingan, I think that's a better scenario for Simons. Whereas when you get him starting alongside another one of those guards, or even sometimes both of those guards, it completely changes the way that the ball is distributed and the touches that someone like Simons can get, where he ends up in a much bigger off-ball role than I think he will in this scenario. So at least if they keep the same starting lineup, assuming we're just swapping in Clingan for Time Lord,
right?
I'm happy to be getting to Simons in this scenario, but I've seen him lay a couple eggs recently.
Do you think there's a chance that they move like Scoot back in the starting line, but maybe shift like Denny to the bench?
I'll answer that question with a question. Why do you think they did it yesterday?
Against Orlando. I mean, Orlando's bigger team with Franz, Paulo out there.
Yeah.
I guess like Charlotte. I mean, if it's they start LaMelo, Nick Smith Jr. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Look, I mean, they could do anything. Like, it's Portland.
Yeah.
They don't have any ties to it. I would have never expected them to do what they did, and yet they did it. I liked their starting lineup more by going, bigger with Kamara and Avdia and Grant. Like, I kind of like those guys at the 2, 3, 4 in terms of size and, ability, I guess. I wonder how much those guys have played alongside of each other so far. It's probably not a lot, right?
Which guys?
I mean, I'm going to say, I'm just going to be center agnostic here, but Grant, Simons, Avdia, and Kamara. I don't really care about like whether it's Clingan or Ayton. Okay, so they've played 250. They've played 252 minutes where those four guys have been on with some fifth guy. Negative 9.5 net rating. They have not been scoring very well. So yeah, maybe they do swap that out and try to figure something out. Yeah. Okay. So let's say they change the starting lineup. You think that it would be Scoot as the most likely guy in place of probably Denny?
Yeah, I think it would be Scoot just because when Simons was out, it was Scoot starting and Sharpe off the bench. So yeah, I think if they were to move one of the guards back into the lineup, it would be Scoot. And then I think the most likely guy to move to the bench would be Denny.
I would imagine in that scenario, I would be discounting a little bit of Simons. I would run rates just to see, how those assist rates and everything look. But I would imagine I would discount him slightly. And at 6,800, I doubt even giving Scoot a couple extra minutes is really going to make him go from like obviously you could roster him if he's starting on a 3-game slate, but I don't think he's going to look like any sort of, major priority. You give him 30 minutes. Let's just say 30 minutes, roughly speaking. 28.5 fantasy points at 6,800. I mean, that's still 4.2x. I mean, I wouldn't even have him looking better than Shaedon Sharpe on a per dollar basis. So I'm not sure I would even get to Scoot. It just might discount Simons, and then it would definitely make it so whoever of Denny or Kamara is just probably not all that playable.
Yeah, I would want to see. I agree. I don't think if Scoot starts, he would be like a play I would go out of my way to play. But I would want to see the ownership. But like if the ownership doesn't move much and he's still like 5% or sub 10%, then I'll be a bit more willing to take a shot there.
Alrighty, that makes some sense to me. Yeah, so on this first run, I really didn't get much of Denny, Kamara, or Grant. It's basically just everything to Clingan and Simons, but this is definitely live to change a little bit. I mean, this whole game script can change. I mean, Portland might be the favorites if LaMelo Ball and Bridges get ruled out by the time this happens. So the good news is 2 games at 7, 1 game at 8. This is a 7 o'clock game. We're going to know all of this by 6:30. So it should be pretty easy to manage. I don't think there's any names from Portland that we've missed or should have touched on. I don't have much else to add. Yeah, we're going to need that starting lineup. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
I was going to say the only other thing to add, I think we mentioned it, it's just that like Murray gets rolled out, you're going to feel a little bit better about a guy like Delano Banton, who I think would be in play.
Yeah, Banton, fantasy point per minute guy. If you can get him to 16 to 20 minutes at that salary and position today, that is going to be a functional value play for a 3-gamer. All right, guys, hit that like button if you're here. We're through the first team. 5 more to go on this one. Schedule's pretty easy. Live before lock coming up next. They're going to take you from 6 to 7. They'll cover all the news that shows up in that window for Portland, Charlotte, Cleveland, Philly. You're going to get all those starting lineups probably around 6:30. So you want to make sure you're staying right on this stream because they're coming up immediately after us. We won't even take a break. They're just going to pop up in between shows. One note, though, no playback tonight. We are not going to be on playback after this one with 2 games starting at 7. All we have is the 8 o'clock game for Pels and Memphis. So there's not a lot of news. So we're taking the Friday off from playback. So all you get is live before lock, which means make sure you're hitting that like button. Let everybody feel good about it. Well, as much as I would like to talk about the Charlotte Hornets, we've got some news to wait on. LaMelo Ball, questionable with a right wrist sprain. Miles Bridges, questionable with low back spasms. Seth Curry, as of 20 minutes ago, is now questionable with an ankle injury. He was probable. Brandon Miller out for the rest of the season. KJ Simpson available today. He was not available earlier today. That is at least interesting to think about, considering the status of LaMelo and Bridges. Kind of makes me feel like one of those guys isn't going to play just because they're bringing somebody else along for the ride. But we are getting some ownership to these questionable gents. 30% to LaMelo Ball on both sites. 50% coming into Bridges on DraftKings. It's 60 on FanDuel. We've got 40 coming into the $7,800 Mark Williams and another 15 coming into Nick Smith. Let's start with Ball and Bridges, assuming they're in. How do you feel about paying up at the 10-5 spot for LaMelo Ball?
Yeah. So I think LaMelo Ball right now at his current ownership is a pretty good spend up option. So on the season with Brandon Miller off the court, 1.47 fantasy points per minute. Solid spot against Portland. I think you're expecting mid 30s minutes or so for him, with upside of a little bit more if he plays well. Played 34 last game against Memphis, 38 against Dallas, 39 against Utah, 40 against Phoenix. So we do know that like high 30s minutes is definitely in his range of outcomes. So yeah, I have no issue with the current ownership there for LaMelo Ball. I think, again, he stands out as a pretty good point per dollar option. And Miles Bridges is the guy getting the most ownership right now for this team. He's coming in around 50%, 7.4K on the year with Brandon Miller off the court, 1.13 fantasy point per minute player. So he's probably your easiest guy to get to, factoring in the salary. And then the other main guy here, Mark Williams, been playing extremely well of late. He's coming in at 7.8K, around 40% ownership. He is 1.46 fantasy point per minute player with Brandon Miller off the court. Minutes have been solid for him in competitive games. You're seeing 30-plus minutes from him. So all 3 of the main Hornets are getting ownership, and I think they should be. I kind of agree with the ownership, though, with Bridges being the easiest to get to, then Williams, and then LaMelo Ball. But I don't think you can go wrong with any of those guys.
So I don't disagree with the ownership. I'm not surprised to see Bridges pulling it. I'm not surprised to see LaMelo pulling a bunch of ownership. I'm not surprised to see Mark Williams pulling that ownership. I'm with the field on LaMelo Ball, miles under on Bridges. Pun intended for that name, by the way. I have 20% of Bridges. I have 5% of Mark Williams. For some strange reason, I am just not getting to this Charlotte side right now, which is clearly live to change. It's not because I don't like them. I think it's just mostly a leverage situation for me. Obviously, I have Klingon in 85% of my center spot, so that does make it a little bit harder to get to Mark Williams. And spoiler alert for when we get to Memphis, I'm getting a ton of Jaren Jackson. So I think my 2 center spots are primarily getting filled by those 2 guys, which is leaving me a little short on Mark Williams. I'm nervous for this. I'm also very excited for the Mark Williams Donovan Klingon matchup, because That's like kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that'll be fun to watch. Two young centers that have a lot of upside. So
yeah. What do you want to do with Nick Smith here? 4,200 now, shooting guard, small forward eligible. If they're both in, we kind of know what he's been doing in place of Brandon Miller. If one or two of these guys are out, though, I think Nick Smith goes from a 15% owned guy to a guy you feel pretty confident getting around 30 minutes at this point.
Yeah. I'm kind of in agreement there. I think he's a reasonable value play as it stands right now, assuming that LaMelo and Bridges both play. If one or both those guys get ruled out, though, he's going to look a lot better. Like he's playing 31 minutes last game, 30 minutes the game before, 26 minutes the game before that. So I think you're expecting close to 30 minutes for Nick Smith Jr. on the season, 0.87 fantasy point per minute player. Not bad. So I think he's got nice eligibility too. He's got shooting guard, small forward, so it's pretty easy to get him in your lineup. But if one or even both those guys get ruled out, he's going to look a lot better. He's a guy that is not afraid to shoot. So he'll probably have a lot more usage. It's pretty small sample size. I was trying to look at with Miller, Ball, and Miles Bridges off the court. But I assume you would get a lot more shots for a guy like Nick Smith Jr.
Yeah, I think he's going to look really good if one or both of these guys end up out. What do you do with the rest of Charlotte, though? If everybody's in, do you want Josh Green, Cody Martin, Moussa Diabate? Like how different does Diabate look to Jabari Walker today? I think is an interesting talking point. What do we do with the rest of Charlotte?
That's a good point with Diabate. I think for me, I would prefer Jabari Walker. Neither are getting much ownership, and Walker as a better point per minute option. I think I would just rather take the shot there. But Mark Williams, we have seen him get in foul trouble before. If he does, you're going to see Diabate get extended. Which game was it? It was one of these games recently. I think it was a game against Dallas. You saw 18 minutes for Diabate in a game. I think that the Mark Williams got in some foul trouble. The rest of the value options, there's really not much ownership here at all going to this team for the value, I should say, outside of Nick Smith Jr. You're getting around 5% to Cody Martin. He's 3.9K. Again, not completely out of play, but he's someone that's probably going to play around 20 to 23 minutes. Doesn't really stand out. Charlotte's running, they're kind of extending the bench a bit, which makes it a bit tougher to get to these guys. Last game, I want to say they played, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They ran a 10-man rotation. You saw a little bit of Isaiah Wong in the second half. So 11 guys in a competitive game. Not ideal. But let's see. Okogie's 3.2K. First couple games with the team, 19 minutes and then 13 minutes. He is someone that I think is viable in large field tournaments just because this team is not great. And I think that if he gets extended a bit, if you get a game where Okogie's pushing 20 minutes, I think he could be a sneaky value option. So I don't hate him at basically the min price. But yeah, Micic, Curry, can't really do that. I do like the point that you brought up a bit earlier, though, with KJ Simpson being called up. I think that is indicating that at least one of LaMelo or Miles Bridges is not going to play.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And shit, what did I want to say there? Oh, Okogie. If Bridges is out, I think Okogie becomes really interesting because he's not a truly terrible per minute guy. Right. Josh Green, terrible per minute. Cody Martin, not exactly great. Josh Okogie in my model is a 0.83 guy. That's enough at 3,200, especially if you're freeing up 30-something minutes out of one of Bridges or Ball. And he could slide up and down the positional spectrum. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I want to watch that KJ Simpson one too, because that actually starts to complicate matters. If LaMelo is a guy, if it's just one of the two, if LaMelo's out, who the hell is getting the point guard minutes then? Is it KJ Simpson? Is it Micic? Is it Curry? Is it Wong? They got 4 different dudes that can kind of take on that role, and that becomes pretty unfun, other than the fact that we'll know who the starter is.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. There'd be a lot of guys they could throw point guard minutes at. I would assume that Micic would probably start if LaMelo gets rolled out, but yeah, that's just because he started in the past when LaMelo hasn't played.
Yeah, we're going to need that news because we're talking about basically 70 minutes of Ball and Bridges that are up in the air. And if one or both of them are out, we're going to create more value somewhere. Who that ends up being is sort of up in the air. But something is going to get created. That's for sure. Curry's sick. Nope. Good try though. I don't think I have anything else here for Charlotte. They're too hard to talk about without the news.
Yeah. Josh Gillen made a good point in the chat. Like, Charlotte is right now 5.5-point favorites. You would think it that kind of leads me to believe that LaMelo and Bridges would both play. I feel like they wouldn't be 5.5 if both are.
So if they're both in, I have this line at 5.7. So I'm spot on it. But it's also possible that one of them just gets ruled out and the line becomes 4.
That's true.
And then the other one goes out and it's 1. So it could just move. But yes, the implication right now is that they are both going to play.
Yep. I
kind of feel like if KJ Simpson's going to be available, they're not super confident that one of those guys is going to be in today.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the most likely scenario is one of them sits right now.
Okay. Well, let's get to another team that has a Q tag, although we're kind of used to this one at this point. That's the Cleveland Cavaliers. Obviously, they're still without Evan Mobley. They're 10.5-point favorites in Philly, 228 total. But we are waiting on the questionable tag for Karis LeVert. He's missed the previous 2 games with this same injury, and he's back on the injury report again today. This is going to get interesting because we've got 25% ownership to Donovan Mitchell, 25% ownership to Darius Garland, 25% ownership to Jared Allen, close to 40 on LeVert, and call it 10 to 15 on Strus, Wade, Niang, and Ty Jerome. I assume you don't really have much of a lean on Karis LeVert, and we're just kind of waiting that out for right now.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's basically 50-50 right now.
Okay. So let's just approach it as if he's in for this particular moment. Okay. Let's just focus on the main 3 dudes, Mitchell, Garland, Allen. They're all owned the exact same. How do you separate those guys, or do you?
That's a good question. So yeah, they're all coming in about the same ownership. I think Jared Allen is going a bit under-owned right now. Now I think the reason why is because we have Klingon, we have Mark Williams. But yeah, Jared Allen with Evan Mobley off the court, he does get a bit of a rebounding bump. I think that makes sense, obviously, because he's basically kind of the only true big out there. 17.4 rebounds per 100 possessions with Mobley off the court. So I do think Allen is going a little bit under-owned. Had a big game last game against Houston. The only downside is, though, with the main guys for Cleveland is still in competitive games. It's the minutes, right? We've talked about this a lot. That game against Houston, down to the wire, competitive game, right? They lost at the very end. 33 minutes for Garland, 32 for Jared Allen, 35 for Donovan Mitchell. So that would be the downside there, is that you're really not seeing huge minutes for these guys. But yeah, I think Allen going a bit under-owned. With Mitchell versus Garland, I think Garland stands out as the slightly better point per dollar play, but I think I like the ceiling a bit more down to Mitchell. Mitchell's been a bit more boom or bust, but we've seen the big ceiling games from him. Right, we saw 50 against Phoenix, we saw 59 against Minnesota, we saw 55 against Indiana. So if you're picking between the 2 guards, I think Garland stands out as the slightly better point per dollar option, maybe a bit of a higher floor, where I think Mitchell would be the guy that has a bit of a higher ceiling. What are your thoughts on the main 3 guys for Cleveland?
I don't have much separating these guys.
Yeah.
I'm right at the field on Allen. I'm right at the field on Garland. I'm a hair over on Mitchell. I've got 33%. We're projecting 24. I don't really see them as all that different. On a different slate, if this were set up slightly differently, I could see a situation where Allen looks even better. And clearly, I mean, the matchup looks great for him with Yabu and Bona on the opposite side. I think the only thing slowing me down right now is the fact that Klingon looks like a really good value. I'm getting to Triple J. Mark Williams is obviously a thing at this point. So we're kind of inundated with centers. So I'm kind of just holding hands on Allen for this moment, but I wouldn't mind having more with him being the clear main center. But I just kind of want Mitchell, Garland, and Allen, and I don't really have any way to separate these guys right now.
Yeah, that's kind of where
it's not helpful. It's not helpful, but like they all just play. They don't play enough for anybody to like really separate. I hate it, but I like it. And look, they're not playing like Boston. When they play these teams that they're supposed to beat by 10, they beat them by 10. Like it's just, they feel incredibly consistent. That just makes me feel like we're going to get 30, 31, 32 minutes out of these three and call it a day. What do you do with LeVert if he's in? Because he's pulling heavy ownership and, 4K point guard, shooting guard eligible feels a bit high to me, even if we know he's in.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit high. I don't think it would be a guarantee that he would start either. He did start the last game that he played with Evan Mobley out, but he doesn't have to start. So, yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with you. Ownership may be a little bit high right now, whereas some of these other value plays for Cleveland not getting much ownership at all, like Isaac Jerome or Max Strus. If LeVert starts, I think you're going to feel obviously better about him. With Mobley off the court, 1.03 fantasy point per minute. The minutes weren't amazing, though, again, in that start. He played 25 minutes. So, I think he would stand out as a good point per dollar play for sure. But I think he is going a little bit over-owned right now. The rest of Cleveland, like the value options, Ty Jerome, Max Strus, as we mentioned, both coming in around 10%. I think Jerome may be going a little bit under-owned. Like, he's just a guy that produces when he's on the court. If he plays a few more minutes than you expect, like, for example, last game against Houston, he played 25 minutes. Like, yeah, he could have a really solid day for his price point. 1.27 fantasy point per minute player with Evan Mobley off the court, 414 minute sample size. Now, sure, a lot of those games a lot of those minutes are probably when the game was out of hand, but still, Jerome, like a solid fantasy producer. I think he is going a little bit under-owned. Him and Strus, though, would look a lot better if Caris LeVert gets rolled out.
Chris Murray is in, by the way.
Okay, yeah. So that makes it pretty hard to get to Lionel Banton then, I think.
Agreed. I don't have many talking points. Like, you've hit Jerome and Wade and Strus enough here. I have one additional talking point.
Okay.
And I'm gonna set you up a little bit for it. Do you have any thoughts on a $3,100 Tristan Thompson, who sort of fits the mold of Moussa Diabate and Jabari Walker? I have a follow-up question after your answer.
Okay. I think I would feel a little bit better. I would feel more confident in Thompson minutes if LeVert doesn't play. If LeVert plays, I think it's just one more body in the rotation, and then I'm not as confident because I don't think they necessarily need to play Tristan Thompson, especially against Philadelphia with like Yabusele. So Thompson is one. I know he's not getting much ownership at all, and I see where you're coming from, but like, I think if I'm going to play one of those contrarian backup centers, I think for me, I would just rather go to Jabari Walker.
Okay. So I agree with the LeVert point. That is going to be a relevant piece of information here. I was pretty interested in Tristan Thompson earlier this morning when I did the strategy show. We saw 2 games ago, he got the blowout run. He played like the final 16 minutes of the game. Him and Allen split every single minute. But if we go back to the first game after Mobley went down, LeVert was in for that game. Tristan Thompson played 0 minutes against Minnesota. The backup center was, call it Niang if you want to call it Wade. I don't really care. It wasn't Tristan Thompson.
Right.
Which makes me wonder, is Tristan Thompson even in the rotation if Caris LeVert is in? And if he is not in the rotation, like we got in that first game after Mobley, I am taking a stand on George Niang right now. 3,800 small forward, power forward, 8% owned right now, and possibly the backup center.
Yeah, I don't hate that. He did play 29 minutes against Minnesota. As you mentioned, no Tristan Thompson in that game. So, yeah, if LeVert plays, again, like I think a DNP for Thompson is definitely in the range of outcomes. And if you do get that, if you do get the Thompson DNP, like, yeah, you're going to get like small ball center minutes for like Niang / Dean Wade. And yeah, Niang is one of those guys where he's not awful point per minute, about 0.9 with Evan Mobley off the court. So yeah, I don't hate that shout right now. Currently getting not much ownership at all. So that's a good point.
Now, obviously, Tristan Thompson could just be the backup center, and they don't have to run the same rotation. He could just get a rotation. So what I did, because I had it split, I gave Allen 30 minutes, and to start the day, I gave Tristan Thompson 18. I walked back Tristan Thompson just a hair so that I could bump up Niang to 24. That is giving me George Niang. So he is becoming a guy that I'm going to be getting to as a GPP pivot. I'm willing to take that chance. But I also have to be aware that Tristan Thompson might just be in the game. Now, if LeVert ends up out, where does Tristan Thompson land for you in the Jabari Walker? Who the fuck am I missing now? Who's
Moussa Diabate?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Then where does he land?
I think for me, I would have still Jabari Walker 1, I would have Tristan Thompson 2, and I would have Moussa Diabate 3.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat there as well. I'm just for some reason, all I can picture if LeVert is out is Tristan Thompson playing the entire fourth quarter of this game. And it's just like, oh, he had 8 points going into the fourth, finished with 28 fantasy points because he got to play against Adam Bona for 12 minutes. Right. So yeah, that LeVert news to me is massive, but I don't think it's massive for all of the people that are like looking at it. I think there's an extra layer to it that you have to peel back.
For sure.
Okay. Now we've got our resident fake news guy in chat. Simons, Kamara, Avdia, Grant, Klingon is your starting lineup for the Blazers. So they are not changing the lineup from yesterday other than the center switch. Gofies, or however the fuck we say this, claiming Niang is scheduled to start. That makes very little sense to me.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if Niang starts.
Yeah, that would imply that it's not LeVert and they're switching from Strus in a matchup where George Niang revenge narrative against Philly.
I was just trying to see if I can find anything on that on Twitter.
Player Pixum said Tristan Thompson might be the worst play of the year, but he also then said Simon's starting as if that was even up in the air. So we're going to go ahead and ignore him.
Yeah, I see no news on Niang potentially starting. So,
yeah. I mean, I hope he doesn't, because that will remove my sneak from this. But yeah, I'm going to be getting to Niang here, and I'm going to cross my fingers that they go back to we don't need Tristan Thompson as a straight backup center. So fingers crossed. Anything else you want to talk about here from Cleveland?
Let's see. I mean, we didn't mention Sam Merrill. Played 23 minutes over the last couple games. I think he would rank behind like Jerome and Strus and Niang for me. But I think he would be at least viable as like a dart throw if LeVert doesn't play.
Yeah, if LeVert is in, you can't look at Merrill or Tyson. If LeVert is out, that brings them back into the rotation.
Yes.
All right, guys. Bink is the promo code. You guys can see it on the top of the screen, and I have a sneaky suspicion you'll see it in a different way as I continue to talk. I told you guys, we just create Millie winners, at least 4 of them since the start of the NFL season. Case Snead picked up one this past weekend, so he now has $1 million in his bank account, or, well, he does for now. Enjoy that $300,000 tax bill. That'll be a fun check to cut. You guys can get any single sport package that we have for 20% off your first payment by using the promo code BINK. We want to celebrate him winning the Millie and having the Stokastic avatar at the top. And we celebrate that by giving you the deal. So you can get, if it's for NBA, projections, ownership, the boom bust tool, our entire simulation package, single lineup sim. So if you're like a 1 or 3 lineup player, you can build them all by hand, simulate them against the pool, get sim ROIs and win rates and cash rates. Awesome. You can use the full simulation package, generate 150 lineups if you want, or more, if that's what you're looking for. And premium Discord. There's probably things that I'm even missing that are behind our paywall. You can check them out by clicking the link in the description or the one in chat. Opposite side of Cleveland is the Philadelphia 76ers, who are going to be without Andre Drummond, Joel Embiid, Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, KJ Martin, and Jared McCain. Pete Nance available for this one. Welcome back, Pete. We've got 10% ownership coming into Tyrese Maxey, 40 coming into Paul George, 20 to Kelly Oubre, and 30 to Yabusele. Let's start with the highest owned guy here. How are you feeling about a 40% owned Paul George? I had him when he was heavily owned in their most recent game. He was terrible. I don't have him today. So I think we all know what Paul George is going to do.
I understand why the ownership is going to Paul George. Maybe going slightly over. I mean, I don't know. I think like him and Miles Bridges are similar options. They're both getting a lot of ownership. You could argue they're both maybe going a little bit over-owned. But yeah, on the season with Embiid off the court, Paul George is a 1.2 fantasy point per minute player. Philadelphia, they're playing the starters a lot of minutes, right? Now, last game it was a blowout against Denver, but in games that stay competitive, like George against Orlando, 37 minutes, 35 against New Orleans, 38 against Phoenix. So the minutes should be solid here, assuming the game does stay competitive. So yeah, I think he's your easiest guy to get to. He does have the shooting guard, small forward eligibility as well. Again, I think maybe going a little bit over-owned, but I still I understand why the ownership is going there. Yabusele is the next in line as far as ownership goes. He's 5K. I think he might be going a little bit under-owned. I know the matchup might not necessarily be the best, but I mean, I don't think they're going to want to play Bona a lot of minutes here. So like Yabusele, I don't think you project him for this, but I think like high 30s minutes is certainly in the range of outcomes for him. Played 38 against New York, 39 against Orlando. So I think he's going a little bit under-owned, and he's got the power forward eligibility, which is really nice. Yeah. We've talked about some good center plays, right? Donovan Clingan, Mark Williams, Jared Allen. So there's relatively high opportunity cost, but since he's got the forward eligibility, it's a bit easier to get him in. So Paul George, Yabusele, both good point per dollar plays, in my opinion. George, I think going a bit over-owned. Yabusele, I think right now going a bit under-owned.
I'm a little over on Yabu. I like the fact that if this is competitive, he's probably playing like 36 today, and it's pretty self-fulfilling for him, which is helpful. The power forward eligibility is everything. He grades out as the number one play for me from Philly. Paul George is a close second. 40% ownership is so much for him right now. I don't like the way that he's been playing, but boy, oh boy, is he just going to go off when I actually don't have him. I already feel it. I like Maxey a lot. I think he's under-owned at 10%. I'm still not getting him, which is incredibly frustrating. But I'm not getting him because I'm 2xing Morant. So I'm basically just taking Ja over Maxey. But I kind of like Maxey as a sneak guy. For a 3-game slate, for him to be 10% owned, like he's going to take every shot he wants. If they just happen to fall, it doesn't take much today. If Philly just happens to win this game, one of Maxey or Paul George is certainly going to be a guy you needed.
For sure. And I mean, with Maxey too, like he's one of those guys that can play over 40 minutes. We've seen that a lot too. He's going to be chucking. He's having the ball in his hands a ton. He's 1.24 fantasy point per minute with Embiid off the court. So I think he's a solid contrarian option. I'm personally not getting into him right now, but it is a little bit scary just because like he could break the top off the slate even at 10K. He does have a pretty high ceiling here.
Do you want to do anything with Eric Gordon or Edwards or Council? Because they are shorthanded.
I know. I don't feel great about it, like any of those guys right now. None of them are great point per minute with Edwards, Eric Gordon, Ricky Council. I think the guy that you probably feel the best about for minutes would be Justin Edwards. Like they seem to want to play him minutes.
Hey, hold on just for a second. We got a little bit of news. Max Strus will remain in the starting lineup Friday. So somebody in chat is incorrect. All right, you can continue now.
Okay. I don't know if we got anything else too. That was it. Okay.
No.
I don't feel great about any of them. I think there's other values that I'd rather get to on this slate right now. Like I think I prefer the Cleveland value on the opposite side. Like at similar price points. Like I would rather get to LeVert. I would rather get to Niang. I'd rather get to Jerome. So yeah, that group of value for Philadelphia is nothing I feel great about there with the Gordon Edwards Council group. What about you? Do you like any of them?
I didn't get a single share of any of these guys.
Okay.
I'm already having enough trouble getting the guys that are good for Philly. Can't get to Maxey, can't get to George, can't get to Oubre. I mean, tough defensive matchup, slow matchup as well. I don't hate that I'm not getting them. I have a lot more of the 8 o'clock game, mildly scary, but I'm going to need a little bit more if Ja ends up sitting and I have to swap it around. We'll see where we end up by the time we get to lock. But for right now, Philly is my biggest fade, I believe. Yeah, they are my least owned team right now. Kind of scary. I'm 2xing Memphis and close to 2xing the Pelicans, though. So, that's going to help me out a bit. All right, ranked Philly. Give me your 5 starters in order, because I know we're not counting anybody else.
Okay. So as far as just my favorite plays in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I would say Yabusele 1, Paul George 2, then probably Oubre, Maxey, and then are we assuming Gordon's gonna start? Did he start the?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess Gordon last. Even though again I don't really have much interest in him.
Yeah, I would have it Yabu, George, Maxey, Oubre, Gordon, but unfortunately those last 4 are not ending up where I want them. But that's okay. You ready to close this one out with the final game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go. New Orleans Pelicans, 11-point dogs in Memphis, 244 total. For New Orleans, we don't have any injury news to wait on, which is helpful. Brandon Ingram out, Herb Jones out, Zion out, Yves Missi and DeJounte Murray both available. And everybody's sort of just getting a bit of ownership here. Just shy of 20 for Trey Murphy, 20 for McCollum, 35 for DeJounte, 15 for Missi, 20 for Javonte Green, who I'm assuming we're expecting to start in Zion's spot. And then about 10 for Jordan Hawkins and Jose Alvarado. Do you have a preferred Pelican?
Yes. For me, it's DeJounte Murray. He's getting the ownership, but I think DeJounte right now is going to be a bit under-owned. So no Zion and no Brandon Ingram. DeJounte Murray, 1.24 fantasy point per minute. He has a 27% usage rate and 38.2% assist percentage. So he's gonna have the ball in his hands a ton. Not a big surprise. He'll be the primary playmaker there for New Orleans. If this game does stay competitive, you're probably seeing 35 or so minutes for DeJounte Murray. So 8.4K. I think he's your easiest guy to get to for New Orleans. Then you have the group of Javonte Green, CJ McCollum, and Trey Murphy all coming in around 20%. Javonte Green, again, I think we are expecting him to start 3.6K. Don't love it. Don't hate it. Maybe going a little bit over-owned. You have CJ McCollum and Trey Murphy, both, again, coming in around 20%. The positive here at New Orleans, though, is they're giving their starters a ton of minutes. Like Trey Murphy especially, he's playing pretty consistently, 35-plus minutes in competitive games. CJ McCollum in competitive games, similar minutes, I would say, to DeJounte Murray. He had a huge pop-off game last game. With Zion and Ingram off the court, you have, CJ McCollum as 1.14 fantasy point per minute. Trey Murphy as 1.08. So those guys are definitely still in play, but I think the preferred spend up for me would be DeJounte Murray. Do you have a lean with the 3 spend ups for the Pelicans?
Yes, the opposite of yours. So you and I are in opposite day today. One of us should play well. Not that I don't have Murray. He's in 20% of my stuff, but I am under that ownership number. I'm 2xing Murphy and more than 2xing CJ McCollum right now. Big stand. I think a lot of it has to do with the pace of this matchup. I've got the Pelicans gaining 3.5 possessions over their average. This is a massive, massive pace up spot for the Pels. So I'm just kind of getting to the opposite side of the ownership and a little bit lighter on Murray. I have basically the same amount of them in the aggregate. It just so happens that I'm discounting Murray a bit. But Trey Murphy to me is the guy that I think is is under-owned here at 8,200. Plays massive minutes. If it's ever close, he's really playing massive minutes. The $8,200 price tag is startling to see when you look at his name, but shooting guard, small forward, really solid flexibility. Not to mention, I'm happy to just be overexposed to this game. If I have to move some stuff around for Ja being out, I have the options to do so. But for right now, I'm ranking them in terms of my exposure, CJ, Murphy, Murray, but I have at least 20% of all of them. So I don't want anybody to think that I don't like any part of it because they all look pretty damn good.
Okay.
Javonte Green, though, a bit of a problem for me. I'm 2Xing him. Do I love this? No. Is he any good? Also, no. But target score at a $3,600 salary, pretty low here. Assuming he is in that starting lineup, I'm just going to hope that that 0.75 fantasy points per minute that I'm projecting ends up being like 0.85, and that's enough for me. I don't like it, but value is limited on this slate, at least so far, unless you're playing centers. I don't have much of Hawkins. I don't have much of Alvarado. I would say that I probably prefer Hawkins to Alvarado, but they're both pretty close. I definitely don't have Daniel Tice at this moment. And I'm also about 1.5x the field of Yves Missi. Okay. So I'm 50-something% over on the Pels. But a lot of that is going to CJ and Javonte Green. I don't ever get CJ right, by the way. So if anybody has any confidence there, today's going to be the day. Big old CJ McCollum day coming, I hope.
Yeah, I think as far as the two centers go, I'm not as interested in. I think Daniel Tice is really hard to get to, but he's Missi. I think it's kind of hard to get to with some of the other centers we talked about. I think I'd just rather get to him. Plus, like the minutes have not been amazing on Missi. When he's been healthy, like Tice has been eating away at some of those minutes. So, yeah, I don't love the centers as much. I think I'm a little bit higher on Jordan Hawkins than you. He's 3.4K. He's played 20 plus minutes in each of the last 4 games. He really has not been shooting the ball the best, but if he has one of those games where, you know, he can have a decent shooting game and he's close to the min price and plays 20 plus minutes, then yeah, I don't hate him as a contrarian play. I think JRE will be in the rotation, but don't really think it's necessary to get to him. Similar price point to Javonte Green. I think you just feel a lot better about the minutes for Green. Alvarado, the only other guy that I didn't mention. I think I'd rather take the shot on Hawkins, but he's coming in around 10% too. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else for the Pelicans, at least for me.
All righty. Well, we're about to get to the final team. It's going to be the Memphis Grizzlies. They do have some questionable tags hanging in the balance that will certainly affect things, and I'm going to need that for late swaps. Speaking of the final game, it's also the final time for you guys to hit the like button before we switch this over to live before lock, because that's coming up next, and they will break it all down for you guys and all of the news that we ultimately get. Man, I should take that screenshot of Player Pick'em saying he's doing 150 lineups for himself and his wife and just send it to DraftKings, but I don't think they're going to shut down the quarter arcade for it. So Memphis Grizzlies have a Q tag on Ja Morant. They also have a Q tag on Santi Aldama. Ja Morant did not go through shoot around, which everybody in chat had no problem telling me. More often than not, you don't have guys that have an illness go through shoot around. So that doesn't change anything for me. If you went through shoot around, I would have very little concerns. But as of right now, I'm playing it straight up. And I'm also playing it by getting double the field of everything for Memphis. We got Baines close to 20. Jaren Jackson's close to 30% owned. Wells and Aldama, who are both questionable. Well, Aldama's questionable. Wells is 15% owned. Aldama's 15% owned. Edie's 10. Ja is 10. And then we've got like 5 to Pippen, 8 to Clark, 4 to Kennard. I'm more than 2Xing Desmond Bane, 2Xing Jaren Jackson, 2Xing Jalen Wells, 2Xing Ja Morant. I'm getting all of Memphis because the Pels stink.
Okay. Yeah. I don't hate it. Again, they're not getting a ton of ownership right now. I have some more thoughts too, by the way, with Ja. As far as illness goes, you usually don't expect them to participate in shoot rounds. I still think Ja is 50-50. If this was like a normal injury, and like a knee injury, or let's just say, and he missed shoot round, then I would lean that he's not playing. But I still think it's 50-50 whether or not Ja plays. But yeah, Jaren is right now the guy getting the most ownership, 8.1K. So on the season, Jaren Jackson is 1.34 fantasy point per minute. So you said you're getting a lot more Jaren Jackson. Yeah, the ceiling's high on him. The ceiling's high. He's only 8.1K. So I get why you would be doing that. As far as the rest of the team goes, 9K John Morant feels about right. The downside here is the minutes. You saw the one game against Houston where he played 37 minutes. Other than that, he's been hovering around 30. If you get around 30 minutes from him, he can still get there. But I think he's like correctly owned. Desmond Bane as your other main Grizzly coming in the mid-teens in ownership. 7.9K feels about right to me as well. So, yeah, I understand why you're getting some more love. Now, obviously, if Ja gets rolled out, that's going to completely change things. Because then that's a team. Then Memphis is a team I'm going to be wanting to get a lot of exposure to.
Yeah, and the swaps here are relatively easy. I mean, given the fact that I have 410% ownership going to this late game. So basically half of my exposure is Pelicans and Memphis. So it's possible Ja shows up in the point guard spot if I haven't had that filled yet. Worst case scenario in that spot, I'm downgrading to an $8,400 DeJounte Murray, and I free up $600, and I undoubtedly have another Pelican or Grizzly somewhere else where I can move this around. So I don't think it'll be too hard to get off of Ja if we need to, but I'll already have a ton of Bane and a ton of Jackson, which will be great. And then I'll be able to get to a $3,700 Scottie Pippen, a $4,500 Luke Kennard. I think those two guys are probably the first two guys that benefit here if Ja happens to be out. But we could get, if it's Ja and Aldama, John Conchar starts to look a little interesting at shooting guard, small forward. Scottie Pippen obviously looks a little bit better. Kennard looks better. Does GG Jackson get enough run at the flat 3K to become a guy? Like, Memphis can change pretty dramatically if those two guys end up out.
Yeah, like I think if both of them are out, like you're gonna have you're gonna have to consider the value plays a lot more. Like I do think a flat min price GG would be in play. I think if Ja doesn't play, the biggest beneficiary would be Luke Kennard. In the most recent game that Ja did not play, you saw Luke Kennard start at the point. He played 26 minutes. That game did blow out too, so could have played a little bit more as well. So yeah, assuming that Luke Kennard would start for Ja, like I think he would be the first guy that I would look to. Surprisingly, you really didn't see a minutes bump for Pippen in that game. He only played 16 minutes. Thought he would have played a little bit more. And then you saw a lot more ball handling for Desmond Bane in that game that Ja missed. Desmond Bane had 60 passes made, 18 potential assists. So I think you just get more playmaking for Desmond Bane. Obviously, a bit more usage for Jaren Jackson as well. So yeah, this team would look a lot better. And then if Aldama gets rolled out too, like let's just say they're both out, like you're going to feel better about like these like Jalen Wells. I think you're going to feel a little bit better about. And then I think you start considering some of those min price guys that you mentioned, like GG, maybe John Conchar.
How do you want to manage Edie? I don't remember if we've talked about him at all because, you know, he's at 4K. Kind of, I mean, he's the exact same price as Donovan Clingan. Edie is 11% owned. Clingan right now, 40% owned. Does that disparity make sense to you?
I don't hate Edie as a contrarian play. I see what you're saying there with Edie versus Clingan, because I think like minutes, like I think Clingan will probably play a few more minutes, but yeah, like Edie he's kind of been underperforming for the amount of minutes that he's been getting. Like we saw, he won in that stretch for a bit where he was playing mid-20s minutes. He had a couple like big games. Like he had 150 fantasy point game. Currently not getting a ton of ownership. So yeah, I don't think that's the worst idea of taking a shot on Edie over Clingan in tournaments, factoring the ownership right now coming in a quarter of the ownership. Because I think both would probably play similar minutes.
Yeah, I think it could be close. It'll be really interesting to see the dynamic in their ownership. Not that I think that Morant and Aldama like have any sort of direct tie to Edie, but if they're both out and that disparity between Clingan and Edie still exists, I'm at least a little interested to see if they try to play through Edie a little bit more in this spot. Yeah, it's something I want to pay attention to, because I think if that disparity is 40-10 in ownership, I think it's a little bit of a gap for two guys that are at the exact same price tag. And I mean, we're talking about like the first two centers, first two real centers off the board this year with, you know, you can call Sarr like a 4 as well. Two legitimate straight up 5s with nothing else. I mean, they're like mildly comparable coming out. Might be a Zach Edey day for me.
Yeah, and one thing to note too is like for a while they're running kind of that 3 center rotation with Edey, Clark, and Huff. Huff's basically been out of the rotation, like 3 minutes against Minnesota, 7 minutes against Charlotte. So you've been getting a good chunk of these center minutes split with Edey and with Brandon Clark. Do you have any interest in Clark? He's coming in similar ownership to Edey at 3.5K.
I got 13%, so I'm actually a little bit over the field. I don't feel like I ever get Brandon Clark right. Add him to the list of people that I like. When I play him, he plays 11 minutes. When I don't play him, he gets like the 24. LaMelo out. Miles Bridges out. Buckle up, everybody. Charlotte's a pain in the ass. Enjoy it, Greg. It's coming up for you next, brother.
Well, they're definitely not going to be 5.5 point favorites now.
Nope. Seth Curry also out.
Oof. So
here it comes.
Oh man, it's gonna be like Vasily Micic, Nick Smith Jr., Okogie. Whew.
Cody Martin, by the way, available to play for everybody that was worried about it. All right, DK, tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter, DK__DFS, or on YouTube, DK DFS.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and let player picks be gone for a bit so he doesn't ignore or annoy everybody else, because he's just going to keep saying he's out. Greg, Eric, you guys happen to be here already. Hi, Greg.
Yeah,
spoiler alert,
you may have caught the premature entrance by Eric there.
2 second, I got so excited. There was so much news coming in. I was ready.
Eric being premature, never would expect that.
Never in a million years. But also, as is tradition, there's no way that we could start this show without players getting ruled out just the second before we start. So I've got Sims on. What does it matter? None of this information I have in here is relevant. So we'll have projections updated in the next few minutes, and it's definitely something that we are going to be going over as it comes. But yeah, this is a pretty massive shakeup to the slate. And then, of course, we still have the later guys who are questionable, which now we're going to figure out, how much lineup spots we want to reserve for Ja potentially being out, because obviously that really matters for the slate. But then there's what seemingly is going to be infallible value that's opened up for the Charlotte Hornets. So interesting slate here. We'll see. By the way, if you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Josh, any plans for the weekend?
No.
All right. Big stuff. DK,
I'm gonna watch my Skins go to the Super Bowl after Sunday. That's my biggest plan.
You're a Commanders fan?
No, I'm a Redskins fan.
Okay. I didn't even know that you gave a shit about any football team.
So I used to care a lot, and that has been my team since I was 6 years old. I hopped on the bandwagon when they won the Super Bowl in the early 90s. So it hasn't been good since then. But, I'm a lapsed fan. It's not like I watch or care. But the fact that if they weren't playing the Eagles, I wouldn't really give too much of a shit. But the fact that they're playing the Eagles, it's a double whammy. I get the satisfaction of my Skins picking up the dub, and I get to watch all of Philadelphia be sad, which is always great.
All right. Well, hopefully it leads to a little bit of shit talk between you and Lofty. DK, anything going on with you this weekend?
Gonna be grinding the 14-game slate tomorrow. Then got a friend's birthday later, but yeah, no plans today, so just gonna take it easy.
All right, sounds good. And guys, don't forget to check out DK's Tails package over at Tails. Also, one of the better followers that we have, I know he just promoted his Twitter handle as well, DK DFS. But if you're in favor of scammers getting called out on the Twitterverse, there's nobody better at the craft than the man DK_DFS over on the Twitters.
Yeah, it's been an entertaining few days to say the least, for sure. So I've been on Twitter, I feel like 12 hours a day.
There we go. Well, I mean, we were messaging about it yesterday. Now that you've scaled back the YouTube a little bit, it's more time to go after evildoers on Twitter/x.com.
Water them all down.
Yeah. Hey, you can't lose if you just recommend to water it down, man.
That's true. That's true.
You couldn't possibly send out a different betting slip in order to have you tail the exact betting slip. That would be absurd.
No, that'd be too much work for them, man. Just post one and then celebrate like a watered down version of it.
Harris LeVert out. Here we go.
Ooh.
Cool.
Give me my Ty Jerome props.
That just fucks me out of George Niang.
Yeah. What?
I was thinking George Niang was going to be the backup center and not Tristan Thompson. So
Well, great things do come from Iowa State, so I don't hate that take.
Boo. Boo everything.
All right, Josh, DK, you guys have a good weekend. Eric and I have got a lot of news to cover, which the people in playback would like to hear from you too, Eric. So go join over in playback, Eric, so people could see us and hear. Well, not see us because we're gonna have our cameras off further. But they'll be able to hear us in playback once you go and join in there. So guys, time to start live before lock here. And yeah, whatever Josh and DK just talked about on the show before, don't want to say it was irrelevant, but it certainly has changed a whole bunch over the course of the last 10 minutes here. Most notably, we got this Charlotte Hornets news here, which is going to be, to reiterate, LaMelo Ball is out, Miles Bridges is out, and Seth Curry is out. Seth Curry normally wouldn't matter, but when you consider that Bridges and LaMelo are out, all of a sudden it matters quite a bit that Seth Curry's out, especially on a 3-game slate. It's just one less guy to soak up minutes. What are your initial thoughts about the guys ruled out for the Hornets, Eric? What's opening up here now?
Well, you said soaking. Now I want to go to Utah. But other than that, there's going to be a lot that shows up here very, very shortly. Let me just count all the ways that we're just going to play insane amount of value. I mean, you kind of have the entire slate unlocked now. I don't know what to say other than I'm going to wait for stuff to get updated on our end because it's just there's so many moving parts. And I think I'll just kind of adjust as we go to what some of the ownership ends up being. I think we're going to get some really good, really sketchy chalk. We're going to get both of those. I'm excited to parse through once we get the update in.
Yeah, especially with it being a 3-game slate, there's going to be some really interesting looking, value and other things that opened up because for reference, we had LaMelo Ball projected as the highest scoring player on the slate by a mile. We had him in for 54.93 fantasy points. Your next closest player, Tyrese Maxey, at 46.64. So here's what happens. It's really interesting on this slate is not only was LaMelo ruled out, but extra value opens up as a result of that without us really having pay up guys to go to. So a couple of things I'm interested to see, Eric, is where does my lineups actually end up getting filled in terms of salary? Because at least at first look, Tyrese Maxey, $10K over on DraftKings, Tyrese Maxey, $9,600 over on FanDuel. That's not a price tag you usually want to be paying for, but we're just going to have this excess salary to spend. So I think that's something that's going to be really interesting with this as well, because I think some of this value we're not going to be able to get away from. Do you think we're going to have some lineups that end up leaving a good amount more salary on the table than usual for NBA?
Probably. I mean, what I think ends up happening is we end up getting Tyrese Maxey really, really popular. We could see John Morant. I mean, we could see a lot of different things. We could see a lot of really sketchy ownership on those guys specifically. I think there's definitely going to be a case for it. I mean, I'm just kind of going through and building out a couple of these by hand. If you played, it's 6,250 for your 8 lineup spots that you're allocating across if you're just averaging out the 8. So I think that all adds up to 50,000. And you got Tyrese Maxey, DeJounte Murray. Who else is up here too? I mean, it's McCollum, Garland. There's going to be enough that we can kind of get to that's higher projected on that end. I mean, I will say this. The one that I'm the most interested to see where the ownership gets to is Mark Williams. Mark Williams could have asinine ownership, absolute insane ownership. He's center. Look at the next most expensive center. We've got Jared Allen, I think it is. That is going to be somebody who at the center specifically, it's just going to get jammed. Jaren Jackson Jr. is 8,100. He does have that center eligibility, but I think forward, you just don't really have a pay up outside of Trey Murphy, Paul George, and then it's 7K and down. So yeah, I guess the most interesting ones to me are going to be Jaren Jackson Jr., Mark Williams, Tyrese Maxey. Where does their ownership get?
I'm super interested in Ja's ownership because this is one that, questionable on the injury report with the illness, wasn't a shoot around earlier. That's usually a pretty good indication that somebody's more likely to sit than play. That's kind of the way I'm leaning. I'm not overly confident in it. Yesterday, I was pretty confident Steph was going to sit.
Yeah.
Guess what? I was wrong. He ends up playing. It was only the second back-to-back he'd played in all season. So John Moran, I do think he's a little bit more likely to sit than play. I don't think it's a guaranteed by any stretch of the imagination. So bumping guys like Desmond Bane and Triple J certainly makes some sense. I don't want to go crazy with the Memphis guys, especially because, like I said, I'm not super confident that Ja sits. But then on top of it as well, it's only a 3-game slate. So if he was to play, then I don't want to have like 70% Luke Kennard preloaded into my lineups and a whole bunch of Bane and Jaren Jackson have been foregone the early games at that point. At least yesterday, I still ended up making out okay because even when Steph was rolled in, like I had the Denver guys to swap to. The Heat game hadn't locked yet. I was able to get to more of some of the guys from Miami and Khalil Ware. So today, if you're preparing for Ja Morant to be out and you're really confident that's the outcome that he ends up playing, you're kind of left for dead without spots to swap to. So that's something else that's really interesting. I want to know, how are you going to handle the Morant situation? I kind of laid it out just to make it more clear, though. I'm going to give ROI bumps to Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane just so I get a little bit more of them. But that's about the extent to what I'm going to be doing for today. But how about yourself?
Yeah, my guess is that the main thing I'm going to do is just make sure that I have access to DeJounte Murray and Ja Morant lineups where I have that bailout. Because, like, you're going to get left on an island if you have Ja Morant as, like, one or two pieces. And if you have DeJounte Murray in that lineup, like, you're basically pivoting down to, like, no man's land. If you play Ja Morant in the point guard spot, which I don't think will be a problem. Like, I think we have enough point guards that we're going to be able to sift through that. I don't think there's going to be, like, me having Ja Morant in the point guard spot is the only piece left in a lineup going into that. We're going to get enough here from Charlotte. He's probably going to be in a utility, but I think the main thing is just like making sure that I'm not leaving tons of raw points on the table. I think Ja to DeJounte Murray doesn't exactly make me feel horrible. Yeah, it's leaving 600 on the table, but I think the main thing is just making sure that you have a game plan. If you have Ja Morant lineups, we get to 7 p.m. Eastern time and we still don't have that news.
All right, so we are going to be getting a projections update here shortly. I want to ask you, though, we don't have a confirmed starting lineup for the Charlotte Hornets. What's your best guess for who they go with as their starting five? I'm not going to hold it against you if you get this wrong.
I think Okogie starts for what it's worth. Okay. I think he's the only one that's like new. So like Micic, we've seen start in the absence of any other ball handler, Trey Mann, LaMelo Ball. So I think it's Micic. Nick Smith's been starting, so I'll keep him in there. Josh Green, Josh Okogie, Mark Williams.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the same. Micic, Smith, Green, Okogie, Williams. Okogie's definitely the one that I'm least confident in, just because he's newer to the team. Maybe Micic to an extent as well, just because he's been so terrible as of late that maybe they're just like, hey, let's run Nick Smith at point guard and then we'll just throw anybody else other than Micic in the starting lineup. I think he's the most likely guy, but I wouldn't be stunned if Cody Martin starts. That wouldn't be shocking at all to me.
No, it wouldn't be either. I mean, Nick Smith can handle a basketball, so there's that, but I think they've enjoyed having Micic in that role, even though, yes, he's been dog shit, and there's been a number of times where he's just got benched because I think he's incapable of guarding anybody in the NBA. Like, when I mean anybody, I mean anybody in the NBA. He is maybe the most flat-footed defender I've ever seen on a court in my life.
His offense hasn't been great either. His offense, he has been woefully inefficient this year. And I mean, some of those games where he was chalk, some of them ended up coming through, but like the first couple where he just really shit the bed. You look at the stat line, it's like, oh, cool, he's 3 of 15 from the field somehow. So we'll see. They might get away from him just for that. So Cody Martin can start, and they could go to Nick Smith at point guard. Micic comes off the bench. Cody Martin can start instead of Okogie. That's also a direction they could end up going. They could go to, I remember a guy who you rostered at one point as a contrarian option worked out, Daquan Jeffries. He was somebody who got extended. I don't even remember which game it was. I just remember there was a game he got extended run where you liked him at like 1% ownership, and he ended up being reasonable. So there's a lot of, the reason there's a lot of places they could go to is because all of these guys, for the most part, are replacement level players who aren't good, other than like Mark Williams. And none of the Charlotte Hornets games matter for the most part either. And it's a game against Portland, another team that's kind of dog shit, and their games don't matter. So Charlotte just might want to try shit out in this matchup and see what ends up happening.
Well, they're not concerned about winning. They're concerned about moving pieces around in the next 2 weeks and then just packing it until next year. What a great time to be a Charlotte Hornets fan.
Well, I mean, it could be worse. I think last year was worse because now at least they've got, LaMelo's asserted himself as being an all-star caliber player again. Mark Williams is breaking out. So it's better. It's better than it's been. Shout out to Chris Williams, who gifted out 5 YouTube memberships, by the way. If anybody else wants to support the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It only is going to take a couple of seconds of your time. It helps us out a whole bunch in the YouTube algorithm. So we do appreciate it if you guys watch it. an easy way to help keep our content free, just liking the video and subscribing. And if you do want to sign up for a Stokastic package, we have a promo going on right now. It's going to be ending this weekend. So one of the final opportunities to take advantage of it, because this is going to be expiring on Sunday. Promo code BINK. We had a member of our community win a Millie Maker last weekend. Who knows? Maybe we'll have another one this weekend. And to honor that, to celebrate it, because our guy, Case Need, ended up winning the Millie Maker on Sunday, we're celebrating 20% off any single sport package here. If you want to sign up for our NBA package, promo code BINK, 20% off. If you want to sign up for an MMA package, PGA package, all of it, 20% off with that promo code BINK. Easiest way to get access to this, just click on the link down below in the YouTube description box. We've got that promo code already loaded in there, but if you do happen to forget it or leave the page, whatever, promo code BINK, all capital letters, BINK. Also want to ask you, related to the John Morant situation, what's your best guess? Does he play? Does he sit? And what's your confidence level? I'm going, by the way, because I think he's a little bit more likely to sit, but I'm going like 60-40 Morant sets.
That's exactly what I was going to say, 60-40. I'm a little bit, I'm slightly, I'd set it like minus 125, minus 130 that he sits. I'm with you. I think that sounds about correct. I mean, we've seen him not go through shoot around and play before, though. I'm going back to last year. I know I remember it. It's just one of those things where if it wasn't John Morant, where it's just like, oh yeah, just take the morning off. Like, you just need to save your legs so you can go 100 miles per hour to the rim. That's going to be what they plan to do with him every day that he plays. So John Morant, I don't really know what to say. I hope we get the news before 7 p.m. so we can all play this slate semi straight up. But I suppose, might lower his ownership a little bit.
And here we have for also, as we are waiting. Oh, by the way, projections just came in. So I want to ask you one more question on John Morant, and then we'll look at some of the projection updates as I see Jacob is pulling it up on the screen there. What are you going to be willing to play John Morant, or is it for you more making sure you have some of your lineup spots allocated to Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane?
Yeah, I don't think I have to worry about that so much. I think I was already getting to a decent chunk of Jaren Jackson Jr. He's the 5th most popular player on the slate in our updated ownership. I don't think I'm going to have any issues with that. I think the main thing is that DeJounte Murray is sitting there as the 7th most popular play on the slate. And if I have John Morant plus DeJounte Murray lineups, I'm going to be a little bit nervous just because I don't have that out. And I'm going to be leaving a lot of raw points. We have DeJounte Murray for 43 and change fantasy points today. And John Morant at 9K sitting there with 42. He's got a little bit less in terms of a projection there. Just be careful about having the two overlap. It's a 3-game slate. And obviously there's lots of ways where the optimal percentage of those two together goes way up, considering they're in the same game environment, considering it's a 3-game slate in general, where we don't have eight games to sift through other options, where it's like, all right, missing out on the two of them in the same lineup isn't a big deal. Kind of a big deal here today, but I just want you to be aware that there's no safety net if you have both of them in a lineup and John Morant gets ruled out after lock.
All right, Jacob, pull the projections up on screen because we got them updated now. And guess what, Eric? We've got a new highest projected player on the slate. Is the one and only Mark Williams. Projected. And I mean, projection for him, it's strong. It's not anything like super outlandish, 47 fantasy points. It's just this is the top of the top for today. We don't have a Nikola Jokic. We don't have a Giannis Antetokounmpo. We don't have these guys. So Mark Williams, the highest projected fantasy scorer on the slate, which I have to assume is the first time that's ever happened, that Mark Williams has been the highest projected player on an entire slate. Not unwarranted, just kind of goes to show the lack of depth in the pay up options. If we sort by the Charlotte Hornets, you guys will see these are what we have in here for projections for the rest of the players now. Micic in here for 29.71 fantasy points. We are anticipating he starts. He's only $3,400. So I know people are really sour on Micic. He's failed his chalk, 3 times or something like that this year? Assuming he starts, though, we've got him in for 31 minutes, a little bit under 30 fantasy points at $3,400, Eric. Once again, assuming he starts at point guard, he still has to be considered the best value play on the slate, right?
Yes. He is. I hate it, but I totally get it. It is what it is. Has he been bad? No question about it. But I don't really care when his price tag is where it is. And I mean, I just look at the rest of my lineups and I'm just kind of sifting through the same kind of guys. I mean, there's going to be a lot of overlap. We're looking for like one or two pieces of deviation, and it's like maybe Micic and just getting away from like the 3K range is something you can do to some extent. I don't really find myself doing it. If we get a Kogi 3,200, Josh Green 3,500, Cody Martin 3,900, maybe we don't have to, but I mean, I'm assuming that there's just nobody else outside of Nick Smith. You would just have to play all the Nick Smith and just hope that he's playing all the point guard, and Micic continues to be like a first percentile offensive player, which he's been so far this season. So it's, I think positive regression is probably due based on what we saw last season. There's no doubt sometimes when you elevate a guy to like, he played 35, 34 minutes when they were absent, the three of them, Bridges, Ball, and Miller before. So he has major minutes upside. He's definitely put up like ridiculous games too in that environment. Back at the beginning of December, 35, 37. He is 3,400. I mean, this is way cheaper. He had a high tag, I think, at 5,300 with all those guys off the floor. Yeah, Mark Williams is there. He's probably going to be the guy you project to lead in usage, but I don't see a way outside of playing a lot of Micic.
Yeah, and Micic was priced over 6K at a point in time last year when the Hornets were really shorthanded. He's not a bad fantasy producer, although he's had some bad games in unfortunate spots this year. The rest of our projections, so it appears we have Cody Martin projected to start in the front court for the Hornets, who's got him in for 30.5 minutes. So he looks really good at $3,900. Nick Smith, he looks good, projected for 27 fantasy points at $4,200. We currently have a Koji projected to come off the bench, although he still doesn't look terrible. 20.5 fantasy points for him at $3,200. Josh Green at right around 20 fantasy points at $3,500. KJ Simpson, I saw somebody in the YouTube chat asking if he's available. Yes, he is up from the G League squad. He's up with the big boy team. KJ Simpson, he's in for 17.5 minutes. That puts him at 17.12 fantasy points. So you got these guys in the teens as far as projected fantasy points. Like, I'm not going to be prioritizing any of these guys, but Josh Green, KJ Simpson, Daquan Jeffries, Diabate, considering how cheap they are and that there's all these guys out for the Hornets, you could absolutely take a flyer on any of these guys in GPPs. They're just not really priorities. First glance, Eric, any of these cheap guys who are not going to be the most popular players on the slate, meaning the Diabate, Jeffries, KJ Simpsons of the world, any of these guys that you're thinking about taking shots on?
Probably not, purely because we'll get news on Portland here at the same time too. And if we get Donovan Clingan starting, he's 4K at center. Play some of him and Mark Williams ad nauseum. Like, I don't know if I'm going to have to go.
We got the lineup by the way starting.
Ancillary. Yeah. So there you go. So I'm looking at it and it's like, well, Donovan Clingan is 4K. I just like that piece. His fantasy point per minute rate should be continuing to go up here. There's no Ayton behind him. There's no Robert Williams behind him. It's basically just him, Jabari Walker eating up the 5 today. John Morant is out.
All right. Well, there we go. We don't even have to wait for the news. He's already been out. So because it was only a 3-game slate, Josh and I didn't have a playback show planned. I was going to just stick around afterwards to wait for the John Morant news, but don't even have to because he is going to be out. So there we go. No Morant. We've got everything that we need as far as injury report news. We still need a starting lineup for Memphis. We need a starting lineup for Charlotte here. So I was just about to run Sims for the Charlotte guys being out, but no need to do that. We should have Santi Aldama. Oh, there we go. Ask and you shall receive. Santi Aldama, he is out as well with an illness. So let's react to the Memphis news and what our initial thoughts are here. And then afterwards, I assume we're probably pretty close to getting updates for Memphis a few minutes out. So once we get all that, we'll look into that as well, the Memphis projection updates. But first thoughts, Eric, no John Morant, no Santi Aldama. What's the implications?
Luke Kennard. Hi, Luke Kennard. He's been playing ahead of Scottie Pippen Jr. Maybe they do go to like Scottie Pippen Jr. just to start him off in the first and third. But I got to say, he has been playing really well. They really like Luke Kennard. They made way for him back in the day. I mean, Luke Kennard was setting 3-point records with the Clippers just in terms of percentage. Didn't have a ton of usage available to him playing with Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and then James Harden. I think he played for a little bit, but Luke Kennard is really good at real life basketball. And I think Scottie Pippen is an exciting young player. They obviously like him a lot too, but Memphis is in win now mode. And Luke Kennard, I expect to be out there playing a bunch, handling the ball a bunch. I mean, even on the season, like right around an 18% assist rate, you're going to project that for much higher without Smart, without Morant. probably not going to share the floor a ton with Pippen. I mean, Desmond Bane is going to look awesome as well. Triple J already looked awesome. I mean, this is going to be where you're going to absorb a lot of those, like, hey, how do we use our salary? Well, Jaren Jackson Jr. seems like a really good start on the Memphis side, followed by Desmond Bane, 7,900. I saw something from DK from the previous show. Well, not the previous show. It was a tweet he had where it's like 17 potential assists from Desmond Bane last time out too. That's pretty readily available on NBA.com. You go take a look at that and work through a couple of the games where John Morant was out and Desmond Bane, all the usage, all the opportunity. Assist rate I didn't expect to be that high. So, yeah, we're going to get to these guys. That is for sure.
Also important. What does Luke rhyme with?
Duke.
Nuke.
Oh, my God. I was just thinking.
Man. I mean, how could you not? How could you not? So there's so many different directions that it is also, I don't know that we could reasonably go crazy off the board contrarian on a 3-game slate here. Cause
really?
All right. I don't know what kind of stupid thing you're about to say, but you're making a face about it.
Well, my thing is if you're going to get different, you might as well get, different with somebody who's at least a good fantasy producer, where we've seen them walk into a new role. And I feel like the one piece of news that isn't going to get reacted to as much now because of how insane Charlotte looks, because of how insane Memphis looks, is the Karis LeVert news. I think this is definitely a spot where we go to the well on Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome has kind of ran pretty unlucky in terms of assists. In the last 3 games where Evan Mobley's been out, the last 3 he's missed, you have seen Ty Jerome get 7 potential assists in all of those. He's averaging just 1.7 assists per game. That is a really, really low number. Now, this is also a spot where they're double-digit favorites. We've seen how many times Cleveland runs teams out of the gym, and he's kind of like taking on not a full Peyton Pritchard mode because he's playing less than Pritchard has this season, but I mean, even against Houston, they kept him out there. He played awesome, 18, 4, and then 0 assists. The 0 assists, I can't tell you how unlucky he's running in that department based on what I'm looking at over on NBA.com. So, like, for me, I think that there's positive regression for a guy who is already putting the ball in the bucket. He could be the lotion play of the night here lately with some of his point totals that he's put up. So there's a chance that he always walks into more minutes. I don't love the elevated $4,100 price tag, but you know what? That's probably going to keep him in single-digit ownership. So I'm not saying that I'm going to be way overweight to him, but if you're trying to get a little off the board with somebody who's going to be sub 10% right now, right, I find it impossible just with all of the salary savers we have, and you're going to get away from maybe Micic in a lineup, you better make a case for Ty Jerome.
We don't exactly have the updated ownership right now, so I'm just going to make some kind of general assumptions here. I think that everybody's going to be expecting Luke Kennard to start at point guard for sure. He's somebody that I'm going to be getting a ton of exposure to. I really like Luke Kennard, but somebody I think has an opportunity that the field might be sleeping on. How about Scottie Pippen Jr., Eric? Somebody who is a very good fantasy producer when he steps on the court, but considering that Luke Kennard, the likely starter, Scottie Pippen, I think probably comes off the bench like he did the last time out. So you have the scenario here where I think there's a reasonably low floor for Scottie Pippen, but I'm seeing people in chat say they don't want to roster players from Charlotte because they're concerned about blowout risk. Do you know what the spread is in that game, Eric?
It's like 11.5, 11.
It's 1.
Wait, what?
It's 1.
The New Orleans game?
No, I said the Charlotte game.
Oh, the Charlotte game. I wasn't listening at all. I apologize. I was responding in chat because they said that I said that, oh, the news already came out. I'm saying that people aren't going to react to it as much, like the news that Karis LeVert's out, because we just have all these other guys that are out that are going to eat up and absorb all the ownership. But anyway, back to what you were saying, Portland, Charlotte.
So my point being is, so people don't want to roster players from the Charlotte, or at least a few people who come in the YouTube chat, because I think the game could be a blowout. Well, the spread in that game is 1. You got Cleveland favored by 10. Memphis was favored by, let's see. So they were favored by 11.5 at the start of the show. Now it's 9 because John Morant has been ruled out. But that's still somewhat, it's somewhat of a blowout risk. It's not like a guaranteed blowout risk, but it's something that has some blowout risk associated with it. Considering that Luke Kennard, we assume, is going to be starting at point guard. That's what he did 3 games ago when John Morant was out. Scottie Pippen Jr., I think if the game was to be a blowout, is going to be playing in garbage time in the fourth quarter as the point guard. That's an opportunity for him for upside. And then also, if you look at the price tag on Scottie Pippen Jr., he's now all the way down to $3,700. I'm just making assumptions on what the ownership's going to be because we don't have it in front of us right now. I don't think the field is going to be playing Scottie Pippen really that much, though.
Yeah, it's kind of the same case as Ty Jerome. I think that that's really sharp. Like, again, I'm assuming, like somebody said that Scottie Pippen 1,000% will start. I don't think he does. I think it's Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane, Jalen Wells, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Zach Edey. If they want to play Jackson Jr. at the 5, they can always do that if they really, really want to. And you could slide, Scottie Pippen onto the floor. But even then, you got G.G. Jackson back. You've got Brandon Clark, who can step into the 4 specifically, like if they don't want to play Edey in the starting lineup ever. But I think Edey's just one of those guys they're going to start, see how it goes right off the bat. I think Misi is a guy that's, a little bit bigger, wider frame out there, more for defensive purposes. It'd be fun to watch some rookie on rookie crime, but I'm pretty confident that Scottie Pippen Jr. will be low owned as well. I think that's a really nice shout out.
Yeah, and for the people who are wondering why we think it's going to be Luke Kennard who starts, well, last week, John Morant missed the game. The starting lineup for the Memphis Grizzlies in that game, it was Luke Kennard at point guard, Desmond Bane at shooting guard, Jalen Wells at small forward, Jaren Jackson Jr. at power forward, and it was Zach Edey at center. So that was the starting 5 they went with. It doesn't mean they have to go to the same starting 5 today, but that's what they went with just a week ago. It stands to reason that's what they're going to do. Again, particularly because, do you remember the final score of that game? They won by 28 points.
Oh, do I remember the final score? I locked on the Lindy's Leans, Likes, and Locks, the under of the game, because I was pretty confident that John Morant wasn't going to play. I jammed it, and Memphis scored 140 points without John Morant on the floor. It made me want to vomit. So, yeah, I'm on the under of 244.5 again. Can't wait to get 7 points, 8 points of closing line value, and lose again. That'll be fun.
We do have the Hornets starting lineup. It is Micic in the starting unit there. So we got Micic and Smith in the backcourt. On the wings, it's Josh Green and Cody Martin, Mark Williams at center, which I believe that's exactly what we had projected from our data team. So shout out to them, whether it's, I forget whether it's Rich or Jason on the projections today, but good job. That is the exact correct starting lineup there for the Charlotte Hornets that we had put into our projections. And let's see what we have.
I just thought there was a chance they would want to give a Kogi a look, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, we got a couple super chats to get to. First is Chris Albers. Chris Albers wants to know, how do we feel about Anthony Simons getting another 40-plus fantasy point night? Is he due? He put up 54 one night, then he sucked. All right, so I don't know exactly what's been going on with Anthony Simons, but he really has fallen off as of late. I think that the arrival of Scoot Henderson and taking the ball out of the hands of Anthony Simons is a little bit of something to do with it. If you're asking me whether I expect Anthony Simons to score 40 fantasy points, it's within the realm of possibility, but no, I don't think that's the most likely outcome. Very far from it.
Yeah, I mean, Scoot started out randomly last week out of the middle of nowhere, had a week of starts, and now he's back to being on the bench. That's a little helpful to Simons, but as you said before, I think I've had like 3 or 4 what the hell is going on with Anthony Simons tweets. He's making over $25 million a year. They were happy to let Lillard leave, basically shedding some salary, and then felt like, oh, we've got our next Damian Lillard. No, you do not. That would be the way that it would appear this season. He shot it brutally. He's been always like a bottom first. Like he is actually, I was being a little bit hyperbolic, which I never am, so it's very rare. But Anthony Simons is actually a first percentile defender, whereas, Micic is more like regular bad white guy defender. Like Anthony Simons is actually just terrible. And
Eric has described him as bottom first. That is the way that Eric is labeling Anthony Simons. So keep that in mind, everybody. Paul left us a super chat. It says, on FanDuel, Scoot Henderson and Josh Okogie, or Simons and Josh Green for the last spots. Boy, I don't really love either of those combinations. I'll say Simons and Josh Green though.
Yeah, neither are fun. I'll go with you, Simons Green.
Chris Albers, can Jeffries for Charlotte be a GPP player? No. Yeah. So not a primary option, but I do think there's a couple of viable players off the bench for Charlotte. Also, like, why are they obligated to play any of these guys big minutes at all? And who knows what the hell will end up happening in this game. But you got guys like KJ Simpson off the bench, Daquan Jeffries, Josh Okogie now, who are all projecting for around 20 fantasy points at close to min price. Yeah, any of these guys are GPP flyers. If I'm picking one of these guys off the bench for cheap, Jeffries is probably my favorite. I don't want to have like 30% of him or anything, but I prefer him to the other bench guys.
Correct.
What else do we have here? Nothing else as far as super chats. Let's see if there was any questions for us in Discord. And no, not at the moment. We do have a projections update, though. So let's look at the Memphis Grizzlies now, Jacob. Pull Memphis up on screen. We'll look at them. And then I think by the time we're done looking at Memphis, we'll probably either have an ownership projection update or close to one. And then you and I could actually start rerunning lineups through the Sims using the most updated projections and whatnot and kind of see what that means for our lineups here. So, by the way, I might have been wrong here that maybe Scottie Pippen will be popular. We have him projected for a lot of fantasy points. We don't project for a lot of minutes. We've got him project for a lot of fantasy points, though. So maybe the field will gravitate towards Scottie Pippen Jr. I was thinking that he was, by the way, every like 5 messages in chat, somebody says the Miranda that. Yeah, we know. It's been brought up. It's been a topic.
That's a thing.
But anyway, Memphis Grizzlies here. Now that we got these projection updates, even though we're expecting Luke Kennard to start, both you and I, and we've got Luke Kennard projected for more minutes, is it surprising to you that we have Scottie Pippen Jr. projected for more fantasy points than Luke Kennard?
Yeah, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. It really doesn't.
Yes, we got Pippen, and once again, he's a much better fantasy producer than Luke Kennard. So we got him for less minutes because he's projected to come off the bench, but in those less minutes, still project for more fantasy points there. 29.4 fantasy point projection there on Scottie Pippen Jr. On the high end, Jaren Jackson Jr. now in for 45.92 fantasy points. We've got Desmond Bane in for 43.96. Triple J, Bane, they both look really strong. The answer is ultimately going to be both of them. But if you had to choose between Triple J and Bane, who do you think you're going to land on more of?
Triple J, for sure.
Especially with the MP multi-position ability, the ability to play him at power forward, the ability to play him at forward. I do agree with you. I think Triple J is ultimately who I'm going to land on more. I'm sure I'll get to a lot of Bane, but I'll probably have a little bit more of Triple J, especially because their price points are similar. And then over on FanDuel, we talk about the two of them. Jaren Jackson actually projects as the highest player on the entire slate for us over on FanDuel. He's a guy who, well, now he's a really good fantasy scorer for both DraftKings and FanDuel, but always he's going to look a little bit better on the FanDuel side of things because of the defensive stats. Outside of the guys like Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, Scottie Pippen, both benefiting extra minutes for them in the absence of Ja Morant, are there any other cheapies that are standing out to you for any reason for Memphis?
Not really. I mean, GG Jackson, it can play just enough right now that it's just annoying. Like, you work through the box scores, talked about it a little bit last night on the video, just kind of like enough bodies that nothing from a prop perspective is going to look all that appealing. And from a DFS perspective, I mean, you're going to look at Kennard getting a majority, I think, of those minutes there at point. You got Scottie Pippen behind him, good producer. Now you're getting 10, 12 minutes of GG Jackson. Wells has been a good rookie. He doesn't really do anything when he's on the floor, but he's been a little bit more assertive from a usage perspective lately. It's hard to really get to anything else there. I think because of where the price tags are on the Charlotte side of things, and now that we have all that news early, I don't think there's going to be any anything that's falling through the cracks of ownership for the last game now that we got the Ja Morant news. So I think for me, it's just going to be playing it a little bit more straight up. I don't see a reason to like get away from, the Micic situation, Cody Martin situation with shooting guard, small forward. I doubt I get to like anything crazy off the board that isn't like Scottie Pippen Jr. on the bench from Memphis.
We also have an ownership update here. So if we go and look at the ownership, if you wouldn't mind pull it up on screen here, Jacob, we'll look at DraftKings and we'll look at FanDuel as well. And I mean, the ownership here, it is just crazy on a few guys. So I obviously clearly in the wrong by thinking that Scottie Pippen would be a pivot play to get to on the slate because he's projected for nearly 50% ownership. Here's your chalk today on DraftKings, and we'll look at on FanDuel as well. Triple J now at 83% owned. Mark Williams, 71% owned. Micic, 64%. Bane, 55%. Cody Martin, 51%. Scottie Pippen, 47%. Paul George, 41%. Those are your most popular options on DraftKings. What stands out the most to you about those players and their numbers, Eric?
Crazy 3-game ownership. It is what it is, though, man. It's really hard to get away from some of those guys. I mean, you look at the top of the board. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr. I mean, what are we doing here? It's just 83% right now. 83%.
It's a lot of people. Which, if somebody in chat,
a lot of people want to play Jaren Jackson Jr. today.
Yeah, I mean,
not that he's ever been in foul trouble in his life.
It's funny. So Mark in chat said, feels like a Triple J 2000 first minute kind of night. First off, don't put that evil on us. Second of all, this used to be a staple of it. He's gotten over it since then. This used to be a staple of the Jaren Jackson Jr. experience. Low owned, 3 fantasy points per minute, and scores a gazillion fantasy points. Popular Triple J, fouling out in 14 minutes. The first couple of years that he was in the league, that was a staple of rostering Jaren Jackson Jr. in DFS. He's gotten away from that. I don't think that's the most likely outcome at all. It would be somewhat funny. It would be a scenario where all of us would be very upset on the internet.
Yeah, we would be very mad. Somebody just asked who's the backup for Micic. I have Isaiah Wong playing a couple minutes, but my guess is more than likely you're going to get some point guard minutes for Nick Smith Jr.
Yeah, Nick Smith will play point guard minutes. Isaiah Wong, there was, I think it was the second start of the year for Micic where he struggled a little bit, and they actually went to Wong a little bit more in the second half of that game. That was pre-Nick Smith being healthy, though. So I do agree. I think that after Micic, Nick Smith probably plays the second most point guard minutes. Could you go over to FanDuel next, Jacob? We'll look at FanDuel. Yes, on the FanDuel side of things, here are the players on FanDuel projected for 40+% ownership. Triple J, 86% owned on FanDuel. Desmond Bane, 73%. Micic, 58%. Mark Williams, 54%. Cody Martin, 48%. Nick Smith, 44%. DeJounte Murray, 42%. What stands out to you on the FanDuel side of things?
Gee, I wonder what also stands out to me. Jaren Jackson Jr., that is a lot of ownership on him. Again, I'm just kind of like sorting by projection, and it's like on FanDuel, can you basically make Jaren Jackson Jr., Mark Williams, Tyrese Maxey, Desmond Bane, and DeJounte Murray fit? Like, you got to be pretty close to being able to do that. Like, all 4 of them? Do they all fit in a lineup, or all 5 of them?
Not only, actually, Jacob, pull up the single lineup sim.
I would love to see this. This is actually the most single lineup sim of all single lineup sim days. So this should be a lot of fun. All right. Yeah. So just sort it by salary, or actually just sort it by projection. Sort it by projection. So we're on the FanDuel. Jump over to FanDuel in the top left first, because I think it's fun because you get 9 players here. So just sort it by projection. I just want you to add the first couple here. Mark Williams, Tyrese Maxey, Jaren Jackson Jr., DeJounte Murray, and Desmond Bane. All the guys who project for over 40 in our projections. Add them to small forward there. Add Desmond Bane. Actually, shooting guard. There you go. So put him there. 4,250. All right. What does Scottie Pippen Jr. have MPE? Put in Pippen Jr.
Also, sort by fantasy points per dollar now.
Yeah, value.
Yeah, sort by the value column all the way on the right. And then we could just start to plug in some of the guys who project the best. So we can't get Klingon into this lineup.
Micic is shooting guard.
All right, so we can plug Micic in.
Okay, we're playing Martin for sure.
Well, this takes a bunch of guys out of consideration. If we went to Cody Martin, let's see, probably Koji would probably have to go into the lineup.
Yep.
And then whoever projects best at 4,200 at power forward.
George Niang.
All right.
All right. Now let it roll. Oh, you just had it there a second ago. Yeah. I want to see it. I mean, this is just at least 200 on the table. And we have like the 5 highest projected players there. We just took the 5 highest projected players, put them in a lineup without even thinking about it. And I don't hate the value pieces surrounding him. We obviously got Micic in there. He has shooting guard eligibility. FanDuel, way to go. Good job. Good effort, as always.
Yeah, we're still missing on some of the top. So this lineup came out okay. it's still missing some of the top value options on FanDuel. So it's not like it's a killer lineup or anything. But let's do the same exercise for DraftKings. Let's see if we go to DK, how many of the top projected players can we get to on the slate. So also, I'm not super high. Like, I'll have some exposure to Maxey. I'm not super crazy about playing Maxey.
Yeah, we can skip
of the
Maxey
expensive guys, he's probably my least favorite.
Yeah, let's skip Maxey for this one purely because, like, the blowout and the point guard eligibility is a disaster. Yeah, and then throw Mitchell in or...
No. I don't think we need Mitchell
we've got,
here.
Okay.
We only have 3,100 left.
Okay. Yeah, remove that then. So we've got... But I'm saying we have the 4 of the 5 highest projected raw fantasy players in there. And now 4,450 on the easiest slate in the history of slates in order to fill out the rest of these. So it's just like... I don't even know, man.
Yeah, let's see. So we would go to Jacob's just kind of filling it out here for us. I don't want a Koji in the lineup though for this one. If you wouldn't mind, take a Koji out. Go to small forward. Let's see. So it's small forward. Sort by. Scroll all the way up. Yeah, I'd rather play Cody Martin than a Koji, and then who projects best in the forward spot now if you sort by projection? All right, so it's a little bit problematic. Go Nick Smith. Take Cody Martin out.
You're doing great too, producer Jacob.
Yeah, go to Cody Martin instead at small forward. Or sorry, I mean my bad. Nick Smith at small forward. Okay, that's
beautiful.
65. Is there anybody there who's like kind of decent? Not really.
Oh, Kenny Ham, hey. Not really.
Maybe we wouldn't want to have DeJounte Murray in this lineup.
Yep. Probably the way it works.
Yeah, and then instead of Murray, let's here's probably an easy way to do it. Can you plug Paul George into the forward spot? And then who projects best at point guard now?
Mr. Simons.
All right. It's leaving some salary on the table, but we're not necessarily trying to optimize this lineup. We're just kind of getting an idea of how some of the lineups fit together. By the way, if you guys sign up with our NBA package with that promo code BINK, get yourself 20% off. Our NBA packages do come with our single lineup sim. So player projections, ownership projections. If you're somebody who hand builds lineups, maybe play single entry, you play 1, 2, 3 lineups per night. Promo code BINK, get yourself 20% off, get all of our projections and access to our single lineup sim. It's really fun to play with. I do a show for the single lineup sims on Sunday morning for footballs before our main slate show. Laffy and I do a single lineup sim show on Wednesday. Usually we don't really have a lot of time on this show to build lineups. Usually there's just, shit ton of players getting rolled out left and right. But when we actually have all the news like today and things settle down a little bit, we can actually sit here and build out some lineups. Let's go to Discord now. I see we got a couple of questions here. Hey, I'm Drew. This is an interesting one, Eric. Who are the locks for cash tonight?
I mean, the lockiest of the lock is Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane.
Mark Williams,
Micic.
Yeah.
Cody Martin, probably. I probably would want to play.
I'd rather play Nick Smith than Cody Martin.
Nick Smith. Yeah. Nick Smith as well. Or independent of. And then, you're just filling it out in terms of like raw salary. There's so many different paths where it's like, all right, I'm landing on Paul George or DeJounte Murray or Donovan Mitchell, depending on like what you're doing here. I'm just trying to like sort through some of these lineups now that we've got everything updated. And like, I do think in tournaments, I'm going to leave like $400 or $500 of salary on the table in a lot of lineups, which I just never do. So kind of fun to do.
Yeah, I am running the Sims in a second with all of our updated information heading into lock. And I'm interested to see some of my top lineups. What are they actually doing in terms of salary left on the table? And then I'll let you guys know of, I'm sure across 150 of lineups, I leave a pretty decent amount, but just of my top, say 20 lineups, I'm interested to see what it looks like for salary left on the table. Einstein wants to know, should we be getting to more Maxey now? More Maxey than we would have been getting to at the top of the show. More value opened up on a slate that doesn't have that many guys to pay up for. So at the start of the show, I think it would have been pretty difficult for me to justify Max, especially because, I mean, just we were starting with LaMelo Ball as an option. But Maxey, what do you make of him relative to some of the other pay-up options, Eric?
Yeah, I think he gets unnecessarily steamed up today, is my guess. We haven't projected around 18%. I know most people are using Sims. Most people are using, maybe an optimizer still, but if you're getting a number of hand builds, and as you go down in lower dollar amounts, if people are filling out a lineup, I have a feeling Tyrese Maxey gets played more just because he's $1,600 more than everybody else. And everybody's had this feeling where they're on their phone, looking at swaps, trying to figure out what to do. And it's just like, oh, well, I'm not going to leave 500 on the table. I'm just going to play the guy who's 10K. And, he's got to project pretty well. And he does project well. I don't think that that's incorrect, but by that logic, I mean, even though he literally projects on DraftKings for the most raw points for us, it's still kind of unnecessary when you have the 8K range as ridiculous as what it is. Mark Williams, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane. I prefer all three by a very, very, very considerable margin to Tyrese Maxey. Plus, there is a floor big time on 10K Tyrese Maxey. There are lots of ways where I can improve multiple lineup positions within the lineup rather than play Tyrese Maxey along with like two thinner pieces of value, like a Cody Martin plus Jalen Wells. Like that's just not something I'm that interested in having, as opposed to, two guys in the mid-range, like a Pippen Micic kind of combination where I just think they're much better fantasy producers. So lots of ways where I'm kind of like mixing and matching, but considering he's at the position that's like the most important on the slate with so many other point guards and, cheap point guards now too, Tyrese Maxey, I totally get how he gets steamed up unnecessarily, but I don't want to.
So it's kind of tricky, right? Because if I'm answering his question literally, where he says, should I be getting to more of Maxey now? It's relative to what? If it's relative to earlier, then yes, Maxey's more viable now than he would have been earlier. And I'm going to have some of him where I probably wasn't going to have any of him before. But to Eric's point before, I think every other player who's 8K, actually, I'll take that back. There's one player who's over 8K I like less than Tyrese Maxey, Trey Murphy. Other than that, every other player who's 8K or above, I prefer to Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, it's so sad too, because I love our boy. He's so grown up. He's so adulting. Trey Murphy the third. I love him so much. And yet I don't see how you can get there today. It's so hard.
It's a very, very big price tag.
Yeah.
Very, very big price tag. Yeah, it was nice. There was a point in time not too long ago where you and I were able to roster Trey Murphy at like $4,900. Do you remember there was a slate where I had as a nuke of the night Trey Murphy at like 8% ownership at $4,900. Look at how times have changed. Now he's $8,200.
No, it had been almost like 3 years ago. I was doing Slate Starter with Renpack. Renpack told me about Trey Murphy the third a long time ago, and I'm like, who? What? And so I kind of had it on my radar the whole year, and then I play him in like a spot where nobody played him. He put up like 60 plus and a 130K on FanDuel. I should have won more because De'Aaron Fox just can't make a free throw at the end of the game. That hurt my feelings very much. We were sweating that, I think, all together. The three of us were, but I thought I was going to win 100K that night on FanDuel. Alas, I did not.
Next question from M Grizzly. Also, if you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel. And even though we're not going to be hanging out in playback afterwards, we are going to have playback running. You guys can watch the games in there. So in 7 minutes, when we do get to lock, if you guys want to hang over at playback and watch the game, certainly available to you. M Grizzly wants to know, who are our highest exposed players and what percentage? He says he doesn't love that he's getting to a lot of Micic in the Sims. Yeah, I think Micic is somebody who's just a necessary evil. A necessary evil is Micic because he's so cheap and he's starting. So Micic, all right, let's pull this up. If you had to guess, Eric, how many fantasy points, and keep in mind, he's had a number of horrific starts.
Yes.
How many fantasy points do you think Micic is averaging as a starter this season?
26.
Right on the money. 25.93.
How about that? Who's this guy? It's not like I knew that off the top of my head.
And I mean, at 25.93, despite a lot of really terrible games, I don't know how you look at Micic at $3,400 and just think of him as like terrible or unplayable or anything like that. I mean, Micic too, if you look at his fantasy games. He's made 11 starts this year. He scored over 20 in 9 out of the 11. So once again, some of the starts haven't been, like blow you away or anything like that. Something else as well, there was a couple of games where Micic actually ended up being decent for fantasy, but started really well that I think people just remember being tilted by him starting poorly and just be like, well, that was a shitty game for Micic because he scored his fantasy points late as opposed to early. No, he's not been great from a real life standpoint as a starter, and he's had some bad fantasy outcomes, but still, he's made 11 starts this year. He's averaging 26 fantasy points per game in those starts, and he's $3,400. Like, people are anti-Micic. He's just not liked. But I mean, this guy is as exotic as it gets, Eric.
You like the way my dick tastes when I pass you on the leaderboard. Let's go.
That's his accent too. That's exactly what Micic sounds like.
That's
People
right.
don't know that, but that is a perfect Micic.
How do you like
perfect Micic impression? And you know why it doesn't matter? There's going to be no interviews with him ever because nobody's ever going to care to talk to him. So they can't even confirm that it's wrong.
Prostitutes in Kazakhstan.
You should look up the post-fight interview from Yuri Prohashka when he won on Saturday.
I love Yuri, though. I love Yuri.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I have no clue, but I love him. Am I going to think less of him?
No, you'll think more of him and you'll laugh.
Oh, dude, I love Yuri so much.
Him
Didn't
explaining
he go out
how
and
he was going
drink
to
with
celebrate
Hill
his
afterwards?
What was that?
I saw him and Hill getting drinks in L.A. Like my buddy's
they
bar,
went out
which
afterwards.
I thought was pretty cool.
That aside, we've got 5 minutes left to go here. We've got the question from M. Grizzly. Wants to know who our most rostered players are at each position. And for me, starting at point guard. Do you have your lineups pulled up too?
Yep, I got him. I'm done. I've had him in forever.
Micic for me at point guard. Shooting guard.
Micic, yeah.
Who got a shooting guard?
Desmond Bane.
Desmond Bane for myself as well. Small forward, Eric, hit me with it.
Oh, God. It's just like Nick Smith, just everywhere.
Yeah, Nick Smith. Paul George is also a good small forward option, but Nick Smith, that's your numero uno there. Power forward, Eric, what do you got for us at power forward? This is a pretty easy answer.
Yeah, it's the easiest one. Jaren Jackson Jr., Denny Avdia in half my lineups. Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I will say this, though. I am coming in, while I do have a lot of Jaren Jackson Jr., because he's projected for 82% ownership, I am so far underweight to the field running everything through the Sims.
Yep. Let's see. What did I finish up with? I'm not crazy underweight, 67%.
Yeah. I mean, he's in half my lineups, but I mean, if a player's projected for 82% ownership, it's generally going to be hard to get to that.
But it might as well be a guy who legitimately, and Rinpack was kind of trolling Misi in the chat a little bit. I don't think Misi is doing anything offensively for multiple years. He is a raw project on the offensive side of things. There is a world where Jaren Jackson Jr. gets a little overzealous without John Moran on the floor, because I've seen it a million times against everybody. He could just, he runs with his head down sometimes and just the most unnecessary charges you've ever seen. So yeah, Triple J, you might as well be underweight to a guy who there is legitimate 3 fouls in the first 10 minutes of the game kind of upside.
Yeah. And once again, it's not because he doesn't project well. And he's the guy I have the most exposure to at power forward center. The answer is Mark Williams. I assume it's same for you, center, Mark Williams.
Yeah, that was easy. Yeah.
Okay. So
who's
it's
number 2 for you at center? That's an interesting one because it's Klingon for me.
Klingon for me.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
The Klingon ownership seems crazy to me. 14% of Klingon. I mean, I guess there's just so much value that's opened up that people are just rostering, Nick Smith or Micic or Scottie Pippen Jr. And that's coming at the expense of Klingon, because I don't remember his number at the top of the show, but Klingon was expected to be pretty popular at one point. But now Klingon's kind of flown under the radar. I love him as, I don't know that he's actually going to be this unowned, but man, if he's actually 14%, which I mean, I'm assuming he is, I've got everything run here and that's where we got him projected at. I think he's the most under-owned player on the entire slate.
Yep. Live long and prosper.
All right. Let's see. Oh, by the way, lots of questions just came in. Thomas Ryan asked GPP favorite play at each position. We just hit on that. Anthony Massey wants to know, is Zach Edey a better play than Klingon? Here's the issue here is there was a point in time where there was like a crazy ownership gap between Klingon and Edey, and it just isn't anymore. Edey's just not pulling that much ownership, but Klingon's low owned as well. I prefer Klingon.
Yep, I prefer Klingon. I have nearly 30% Klingon.
I have 40% of him.
Oh, you have even more than I do. I thought I was making a pretty good stand on that one. I did ramp him up in the Sims a tiny bit, but yeah, I really like getting to Donovan and Klingon today.
All right, final question here, Eric, because we only got about 30 seconds to go. And if you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Who ruins our night?
Jaren Jackson Jr. I mean, 2/3 of the lineups, either he's going to put up 75 and it's one of the lineups that you don't have him in, or he just sucks and he just puts a big fat turd in 2/3 of your lineups. Or that's what it is for me right now. So I see that happening. The other guy who could really just ruin our nights, we just got done defending the honor of Micic. He's been fucking terrible. So we can't say much else. If Micic just plays bad, night. We'll see you guys on Saturday.
I mean, at the same time, too, though, he's projected for 70% ownership, and I have been 60% of lineups. So he's in more than half my lineups, but I'm actually a little bit underweight to him. But also, I mean, he's my most rostered point guard, but.
Yep. Makes sense.
I mean, when somebody's 70% owned at min price, like, how much could they really kill a lineup?
We'll find out.
Yeah, I guess we will. So, guys, if you want to watch the game over in playback, head on over there. I'll drop the link in. I'll throw the game on there. Any final thoughts heading into the weekend, Eric?
No, I'm excited. NFL Live Before Lock, Matt Kajeski and myself. It'll be weird having a week off of NFL in between the Super Bowl and the conference championship games. So come hang out with us on Sunday. Looking forward to that. Obviously, I'll have the premium Discord rocking. I'll have an NFL Indies going. I'm going to be, there's 14 NBA games tomorrow. Tomorrow is like Christmas, and my wife's in New York. And so I just get to gamble all day, and I cannot wait. I'm not going anywhere. Not if I'm leaving.
All right. There we have it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great weekend. Sunday, I'll also be doing my lineup building segment on NFL Live Before Lock. So check that out. And promo code BINK, if you guys do want to go and check out any of our packages for any single sport package, 20% off, promo code BINK. Have a great weekend, guys. See you back here on the channel on Sunday.